Hello and welcome to No Bad Notes, a screenwriting podcast. I'm Athena Mandis, a screenwriter, filmmaker and senior lecturer in film practice at Queen Mary University.
And I'm Hannah Palmer-Pryor, producer turned screenwriter. And we're on a mission to encourage emerging screenwriters to embrace feedback because it's an essential part of the development process.
And to help us on our mission, we're interviewing screenwriters along with their trusted producers and script editors to go behind the scenes and explore how notes have helped working writers convert their scripts to screen.
On the show today, we have showrunner Sarah Scheller, whose credits include Netflix's The Letdown and upcoming ITV thriller The Family Next Door. But she's here with us now to talk about her incredible show Strife, alongside writer Andy Healy, who was in the writer's room and wrote episodes on both series 1 and 2.
Sarah and Andy, welcome to our podcast. Firstly, congratulations on Strife. Obviously, an amazing series. It's out in Australia. It's not here in Europe yet. And so what I'd love to know is, how did it start? How did you get involved, Sarah? Tell us a little bit about how this series came to be.
Well, I was living in LA at the time. I'd lived there for about 10 years. My husband's a director, so we moved over there. He was on the back of selling a couple of shows that he'd made in Australia in LA. So we moved over specifically for one of those shows, and then that didn't end up going at the time. So he just started working as an episodic director. So while I was living in LA, I made a show called The Letdown in Australia. So I sort of came back and forth. I wrote it in LA and then came back to Australia to shoot it. And then while it must have been, well, it was 2020. So we were in lockdown in LA, and my agent sent me Work Strife Balance from Mia and said, Made Up Stories, Bruna Papandreou, they're looking to develop this. I'd obviously, knew of Bruna, was desperate to work with her. So I read the book, and it's not really a memoir, it's a series of essays. And I was really struck by the humour in it. And she writes a lot about parenting and being the parent of adolescent kids at that time. And my kids were sort of on the cusp of adolescence at the time. And so it felt like a natural progression from like The Letdown, which is very much about new parenthood. And I loved the world. I loved the landscape of it. I loved, before I was a writer, I worked in public relations, which was an all-female office. And so I sort of felt like I knew the world, and I felt like I understood me as sort of comedy. Yet I was sort of pushing very much that it should be a fictionalized world and not a biopic about Mia. I didn't know Mia personally. I knew of her.
Sarah, was that an open writing assignment, or was that they'd gone to you and thought you were the right voice, and were you interested?
Yeah, they'd actually been to somebody else before, and I think that writer had delivered something, but it wasn't quite right. So then right. I think, and she may have actually been with my agent, and my agent had suggested that maybe I would be interested. And so it came to me specifically. And, I obviously had an initial meeting with Made Up Stories with Bruna and at the time Jodie. We had an initial discussion, and it just felt like, it's really important to sort of gel with the people that you're going to be working with, because producers are so actively involved in making television, especially in Australia. They really are the gatekeepers.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things we want to highlight as well to our sort of listening audience, is that TV especially is such a collaborative process, and that the producers and the people giving you notes are core to that process. And so finding the right fit is, of course, incredibly important.
And if the production company in Australia is like the studio in America. So you are pitching to the producers initially to see if you're right for the project, and to see if you think you're in good hands. And, I knew I was. And then you pitch it to network. So that initial step was really just coming up with a Bible, really. So we did I think we did maybe 2 weeks or 10 days in a little Zoom room from LA. We had Jesse and Claire Stevens, who worked at Mamma Mia with Mia. They were in the room. And we had Emma Carmichael, who used to edit Jezebel, which was a feminist website in America. And she was moving into screenwriting. And a friend of mine had just done a writer's room with her and suggested her, said, she'll be great. So we had a really fun 10-day, 8 hours a day, which is, I don't know if you've done Zoom rooms, they're intense. It's just like.
So did you bring together the other like, did you have a say on who was in that room?
I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, Claire and Jessie came with the project and they're brilliant. So I really enjoyed getting to know them, and they were involved in every writer's room that we had subsequently, which Andy was involved with. And they also wrote episodes. Mia sort of came in and out. She was sort of available as we needed her. And we had Lucinda, who was a producer at Made Up Stories, and she was in the room the whole time, and she was also brilliant, one of those very smart producers that is able to hold the whole show in her head at all times. So yeah, I was involved really with getting another writer, which is how I brought Emma into it. And Mia obviously was fully aware of Jezebel and was excited to meet Emma, and she was a great addition.
So can you tell us a little bit more about building the room? Like, what do you look for when you're a showrunner trying to shape a room, and what was the process of bringing Andy into that room?
Well, so then when it's such a slow process making television. It's quite disheartening for emerging writers to listen, but it was cut to 2 years later, and I was back living in Australia, and we'd pitched the show. I'd already written a pilot, so Made Up paid me to write a pilot. And then we took the show out. And so I think Bruna was pretty intent on binge from the get-go for a number of reasons. And so following that successful pitch, we quickly gathered a room together. Andy came via Bruna. They were friends. Andy and I had a Zoom. I instantly connected. You want to know that there's a connection on a personal level. I want to know that this person is funny, that that we like each other, because, not that that's crucial, but it does help, because writers' rooms are so deeply intimate. And, you're spending so much time together, and you're oversharing, and, you want people I want people that have stories to tell. And, because so much of a writer's room, particularly with comedy, which is so collaborative, you want good anecdotes. I can get a sense if someone's holding back. Often I find that actually with comedians that I feel like they hold their best material. That's like really frustrating. It's like, just give it to me, because I'm a big believer in that. The more ideas you generate, They just keep coming. So you want people that are open. So I feel like as a showrunner, you get a pretty good sense of of judging someone, straight away. And Andy and I just connected, and also he had a connection to the story. He knew Mia. He'd worked in advertising. He's got a very quick brain for copywriting and coming up with. He understood the world and the landscape. And we also wanted a male.
I was going to say, Andy's the only male in the room, and it's worth saying to our listeners that Strife, takes place in an all-female bar one male, in a writing kind of magazine. Before it was an online magazine, it was like a website for women's issues. So, and Andy, you're the only man in the room for Strife. So let's talk a little bit about what that was for you coming into a project that was already kind of started as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very quick turnaround from what I recall. I remember Bruna putting a call into me and saying, we've put the room together for Strife, and I rarely say this, but we need a man in the room. And so, as Sarah said, we had a quick, I think I sent a couple of samples over to Sarah. We had a quick Zoom chat. Obviously, I was excited about the world and where Sarah was taking things. And then I think
Andy,
in a couple of days,
can I ask what your samples were?
There was a Killing Eve spec that I wrote, which I thought was a nice balance of drama and comedy. And then I also think I gave the pilot to Presumption, which is a legal drama.
So an original
and a spec piece as well. Yeah. And so I think within a couple of days I was organizing flights and getting in, and stepping in was really daunting because everyone in the room already was kind of like a powerhouse. When we went round and introduced ourselves, Claire and Jesse were saying, oh, they've done their experience at Mamma Mia, and obviously Sarah was talking about the letdown, and it kind of got to me, and I said, hi, I'm Token, and first of all, I want to apologize for all the wrongs that men have done to you. And I think I quickly won them over, and I explained my background that was advertising, and I had worked with Mia when she was the editor at Cosmopolitan and was really reshaping what Cosmo was as a magazine. Thankfully welcomed straight away. I think there were a couple of times when Sarah might say, well, Andy, what's the male perspective on that? So it was nice to kind of balance things out. But I think for the most part, we were all just really interested in the stories that we could tell, knowing that we were dealing with a 2012 world that would air in 2024. So we could look at what online worlds have become, and cancellation, and everyone posting mean tweets and things like that, and we could sort of start to play with the seed of that. Instagram had just started, and people were taking photos of their salads, and what is the world going to evolve into, and we could make a commentary on today's world by sort of planting the seed in where the story was heading.
I think that's something that the show did incredibly well for us viewing. We were talking about it earlier, and although it is a 2012 world, actually all of the issues that you raise just felt so relevant for now. And that was what was so exciting about it, that you were able to sort of get into so many different issues through all the different stories, each of the characters, and the stories that they're all writing about as well. It feels incredibly relevant, even though it is a historical telling.
I think also the other thing I'll say about Andy and wanting to have a male voice in the room was that we were sort of intent very early on to make it about her home life as well. And we knew that there was going to be this sort of disintegration of a marriage, and we wanted John to feature, quite heavily in the series. We always sort of pitched it as a workplace comedy where we go home with the boss. And that was, like to see how both of those worlds can coexist was really important. So I think it was another reason to have a male voice in the room to sort of defend men.
And you do that so well. And I thought what was really interesting, I want to take you back, because this obviously is inspired by Mia Friedman's memoir. How faithful were you to it? What was that adaptation process? Because you were talking about how you wanted people who had stories to kind of in the writer's room to share. So how did that sort of adaptation come about?
It was very loose. It was really a jumping off point. We took the world, we took the female boss. She had adolescent children. Mia's obviously happily married, so she hadn't gone through a divorce. So we just took the world, and Mia was happy with that. And she was also incredibly generous she's had a lot of, it's very difficult being a female boss of a media company, of a female focused women's company. And there's been times where she's been cancelled and had really nasty pile-ons. And she was very generous with, take all my stories if you want, use them, because it's interesting stuff. So really, it wasn't a faithful adaptation. Like I said, that book was really a series of essays more than a straight memoir. But it's such a rich world that I could see that it was just a great setting for a show. But we took elements. Like Andy said, she was a magazine editor, very young, doing incredible things, at 25, then got into the online world before anyone else, then got into podcasting before anyone else. Like, she was a real trailblazer. And with that comes huge responsibility. So there were elements of the sort of building blocks of her career that we borrowed, but not necessarily the minutiae and the detail. And she, there was parts of her son's life that there was, her son wrote an essay for that work, Strife Balance, which was this beautiful essay about having a parent who was always kind of, he organised his own play dates. So like when he was 6, he'd be getting friends' parents to pick him up because Mia was just always working and just like, and she's been since diagnosed with ADHD very publicly, but just trying to navigate all these things. And he wrote this very funny essay. So there's elements of his life that we sort of took into the show, but nothing too close to the bone for it to be, humiliating.
But you certainly, I mean, there are scenes that I can think of now where Ev's son is called up to the front. She's doing a talk and there's a question
That
that's fired
pornography.
out. And, so it's wonderful how it's not exactly the same, but you're taking parts of that life story and then building this world that feels incredibly authentic, because of the foundations that it's built on. So
that's right. And I think also once we had Asher Keddy attached, who's a bit of a legend in Australian television, and is such a strong comedy actor. And she also loves to get into the nitty-gritty of a character. Like, she loves comedy. She's a real clown, but she also loves drama. So the sort of home life became really important than just to seeing her in this setting at work. And it's also there's elements of the digital media that are not conducive to television, because a lot of it's just typing or screen stuff. And so there's part of it that's not that dynamic to look at all the time. So it's how much of that world can you keep the audience engaged with.
I was just wondering, when you're building this sort of cast of characters, you're very good at quickly introducing us to characters, helping us get to know them, but none of them are cliches. I felt like all of your characters have got such a rich depth to them. They feel like real people. How do you go about that process when you're building this cast and working out what the arcs of everyone's stories are going to be for the season? How does that work in the room?
I always sort of like to tease the stereotype. So you might have a stereotype, and it's obviously for television, you do need to get an idea of who that character is pretty quickly. But if you can subvert it in a way, or just be a little cleverer with it, then you still get the character archetype across, but you just do it in a more grounded, real way. So I think we sort of spoke a lot about that in the room, of how to surprise the audience about this character, that they might think that it's like, for example, Jeet, who was this sort of environmentalist and quite moralistic, but then she loves the royals, or she's there's just little elements that are surprising all the time. So I think we sort of tried to work hard to do that, didn't we, Andy?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, I think, and to be fair, a lot of the characters were present and fully formed in the pilot that Sarah had written. But we spent a lot of time in that first week exploring all the characters and really making them three-dimensional. And the idea of having Penny writing a parenting column, and she really hates kids. As Sarah said, you start to play with and start to twist with the archetypes and the stereotypes. And so there was a lot of fun of where these characters could go, but also making sure that, yes, when you did get introduced to them, if you look at how each character is introduced, when we first see Opal, I think she's coming in, she's hungover, and she's very much the it girl. And when Jeet arrives, it's the classic kind of, she's the surrogate for the audience who's new to this world. So we get to see how everything happens through her eyes. But what I think Sarah did brilliantly was didn't labor on that. It was kind of like really quick pace, because that's the environment that you're in. You're kind of, okay, you're here to do a job now, start on it. It was, here are all the characters, and then we were given the space and the opportunity to let them develop and reveal themselves over the first season, and then really kind of delve into who they are more so in the second season.
I mean, the characters are phenomenal. You just fall in love with all of them and all their flaws, and they're so real. But the other thing that struck us as well was the tone, the uniformity of tone across all the episodes of the season. It's written in one voice, even though there's different writers on it. So talk a little bit about what that tone is. How would you describe it? Because I think it's a really superb tone.
Well, I'm a big defender of the dramedy. Like, I just think, there's a lot of people that hate that term. And I just think that sophisticated comedy has elements of drama in it, and trying to keep everything real and grounded. Like, I remember being very inspired early on by Sex and the City and listening to Michael Patrick King talk and saying that about their writer's room, that every story that you see on Sex and the City happens in real life. And once you know that, as outlandish as it seems, once you know that actually happened, you can write from a place of authenticity. And you can write truthfully, even though it's crazy, some sexcapade story that just seems so unbelievable. But to know that it happened to one of the writers, then you can seriously write about this. And I think I've taken that on board. Like, it's just, I always want everything to be grounded in truth, even if it is comedy. So I think it's somehow managing the balance of comedy and drama.
that's what we felt you had done so well, that you turned from comedy to drama just so smoothly. Moments can suddenly spin and surprise us, and it felt real. The comedy isn't heightened in a way that you're getting into a sort of surreal, heightened world. It all feels like the chaos that could happen to a busy working mum, I think.
Right. I think it's
felt very fresh.
I think the tone comes from the comedy, really. Like, one other thing that I live and breathe by in terms of writers' rooms is that you can always add comedy, but you can't add drama later. You know, like, you've got to get your drama blocks in place early on. And then, and I know I can always make a script funny. I'm sure Andy feels the same. Like, once you write comedy, you know what to do. But you can't throw in more dramatic scenes. Like, it's harder to do. So I think it's all about the comedy. And, you know, like Andy will say, it's humiliating for the writers sometimes and heartbreaking when I attack their scripts. But it's just to make sure that the comedy feels of the show, because you do get sometimes writers that will come in and go, okay, this is a comedy, I need to be really funny. And often it's not the style of comedy. So it might go bigger, where I just tweak it and pull it back a little bit, because I know that's really funny, but it's not quite the show. And that is really the role of a showrunner. It's just to control the tone. Like, I just did a drama and I was on set the whole time for 6 hours. And same thing, it was just to control the tone of the show, working with the director, obviously. But it's I think tone is everything with a show. And it is hard when you've got multiple writers. And, you know, with The Letdown, I wrote that with Alison. We wrote every script together. We still had a writer's room for season 2, basically because we wanted to focus on the male characters. So we've got some dads in, or we wanted to focus on the lesbian mum. So we got some LGBT mums in. And like, we tailored our room, women that had had abortions that we wanted to speak to. You know, like, tailoring it is a fun way of doing it as well when you're writing all of it, because different perspectives are really important, I think, even if you are going to, you know, I know a lot of the shows, like in the UK, a lot of the really strong, you know, like Baby Reindeer or Adolescents were all one writer. Did Jack write all of
Absolutely. Well, I think Adolescence was Stephen Graham co-wrote it with Jack Thorne, but it was the two of them working together as a sort of mini team. Richard Gadd, Baby Reindeer. So that is very common in the UK, that it will be sort of one voice going through. But I think your show is so tight. I don't know. It would be very difficult to produce something like that to the high standard that you deliver when you're talking about a group of writers as well. I think what you do so brilliantly is bring in so many different perspectives, and that's very hard to do.
I think you're right. I think it's when there is such a strong ensemble and you've got so many different storylines, and we knew that we wanted it to be fast paced to reflect the environment. And it's funny because that was Mia's big note always on watching edits, was like, it feels like a magazine, it doesn't feel like an online. And it's hard when you're filming like a scene with, you know, a bunch of people at laptops. It's hard to make that really feel dynamic and feel like, you know, short of it being like a newsroom where you've got the phone ringing all the time. And it's not like that, because actually when I was speaking to Emma from Jezebel in that first room, she said, it's actually really quiet. Like, everyone's just sort of sitting there typing. Like, it's, you know, there's not much of a vibe. You know, you don't have music playing. You're glued to your chairs. You know, that story about one of the writers getting hemorrhoids was from her at Jezebel, because she's like, you had so many stories to deliver every day that you didn't go to the bathroom.
And I also think that there's something to be said also for, you know, in the room, when you do develop a really safe space where people can throw out stuff and there isn't any fear of a wrong suggestion. There would be moments in the room where an idea or something would land and we would think it's very funny in the room, in the moment. But then as you come to the writing, you are sort of discovering the tone and you realize maybe that is a little bit too broad and we need to fine tune that. You know, Sarah, as the showrunner, definitely had her fingerprints across every script and making sure that the humor was landing and that it was earned, that it wasn't just, oh, this is funny, how do we work that in? It was more humor coming from the environment and the drama that was taking place. And that was definitely something that we learned a lot from Sarah with that, and then moved that more into the second season.
And often in the room, you're getting on a on a bit of a flow with some ideas, and there'll be some outlandish ideas that everyone's on board with and we're all laughing. In the back of my head, I probably know it's not going to end up on the page, but it's just really nice to let ideas breathe and let people go with them and all have fun and enjoy, like it's rather than shutting everything down straight away, because often you need to go all the way to come back to find exactly where you need to be. So it can be a lengthy process, but I think it's fun to explore wild ideas, even if you know you're going to be pulling it back.
So that's interesting, because your processes in running the room is creating a safe environment is as important, like what's going to give rise to these ideas and how you're going to manage them. So talk a little bit about how you create that space as a showrunner.
Well, I think creating a safe space in the room is the most important thing, I think, as a showrunner. Everybody should feel like they have their place and everybody should feel comfortable in pitching ideas, and there should be no hierarchy. And there's boundaries, of course, but preferably no boundaries. You want to get loose. And I feel a responsibility as well to get loose with ideas. And I feel like there's something lovely about rolling with an idea and everyone jumping in and it just getting out of control almost. I never like to shut down ideas straight away. I think it's really important to explore them, like I was saying before. But I just, everyone should feel comfortable. And I think that comes in your selection of writers as well. I've been in a room where a producer or a showrunner has said, "Oh, I hate that idea. I hate it." And I'm just like, you just feel humiliated. It's the wrong thing to do in a writer's room. Everybody should feel like they're contributing. And also not that they have to contribute, I remember my husband worked on a network comedy in LA, and just one day he noticed that there was a new young writer and she was very quiet, and he came home going, "Oh, she's going to get fired. I know she's going to get fired. She just didn't talk enough." And sure enough, she did get fired. So you don't want to create a situation like that where people are scared to talk and then scared to not talk. And that's why smaller rooms are also quite comfortable and nice, 6, 7 max. And it's just like a therapy session, to be honest. You come in and you just, it's very fun. It's very fun.
That's credit to you, though. I mean, Andy, that was your first writer's room. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, correct. Yeah.
Talk us a little bit what it felt like to arrive on this amazing show that you read the pilot on, all these women.
Yeah. Yeah, as Sarah was saying, it was very much a safe space. So you felt like you could pitch ideas. And I think all of us initially were, it's like first day at school and you want to impress the teacher. And you want to almost kind of like feel like you've earned your spot. So if you can get a good idea up on the board, you kind of go, "Oh, okay, that's a good day." So initially, I think it is finding the rhythm of the room. And Sarah pulled together a room where we had people who were really good at structure and people who were really good at coming up with characters that were wacky and crazy. And you would sit there, and as a new writer, especially, I was trying to learn as much from everyone in the room as well as contribute. And it's also knowing when not to contribute, when not to just speak up for the sake of, "Oh, I haven't said anything for 5 minutes. I better say something now." And I remember there was, I think on the second day, maybe, I think it felt like half the day was spent talking about menstruation. And I just kind of like sat back. I thought, I've got nothing to add here, and I'm not going to just chime in for the sake of it. It's like, oh yeah, I can remember when. And so you have to get comfortable in sitting some things out and knowing that, I don't think Sarah's looking at me going, "Well, he hasn't said anything for a while," and knowing that the story and the ideas will revolve around into something that you can contribute to. And yeah, I think sometimes sitting something out and creating space is just as important as speaking up when you do have something promising to share. And it's also learning very quickly the shorthand of, okay, I've pitched that idea, but I don't think they got it. So do I pitch it again, or do I just let it be? And sometimes it would warrant pitching again. And other times you would kind of go, okay. And I think, I don't want to reveal Sarah's techniques, but I discovered early on that Sarah had very much a technique of judging an idea, and you could see her thought process, but it was always positive reinforcement of the idea. And then she would move on. And so it was never like, that's a stupid idea. Does anyone else have anything better? It was always, okay, yeah, that's encouraging. That's encouraging. But what about? And then we'd all move, but you never felt shut down. I think as creatives, we all are very protective of ideas. And I think sometimes if you come from a place of scarcity where you think this is the only good idea I'm going to have today, and it doesn't get up, you can completely shut yourself down. But Sarah created a room where there was just this free flow of, and everyone was just constantly throwing stuff up and seeing if it landed. And sometimes it would get on the board, and then the next day we'd look at it and it would, be taken off the board because it didn't fit. And it's constantly evolving, and you're constantly looking to the people who are with you to take you on that journey as well, and to build on something. And sometimes it would be something that that Romina would have said the day before. And then we've all gone home and thought about it a little bit, and it's nagged in the back of our minds. And then you'd bring it back up the next day and we'd revisit something. And so it was great to have those opportunities.
It sounds ironic, but you don't want it to feel like work. Like you want it to, even though it is work, and it's great work, like it should be fun and it shouldn't feel like a chore, because also plotting is really hard. Like my favorite time is that first week of just brainstorming and just blue skying and just throwing any idea onto the board and going, where can we take this character? Because I feel an immense responsibility to, for someone to say, you're going to make a TV show and you're going to get to write it. And it's a huge opportunity and it's a huge privilege. And I think it came out of making The Letdown, a show that still resonates with women. And I still get messages from women on Instagram, whether they're in Mexico or Ireland. I just watched The Letdown. It's 4 a.m. and I'm just breastfeeding, and thank you so much. And, that just really, really affects me. And I think what a great opportunity to be able to make a show that says something and touches people. And so I'm always thinking about that. It's like, I'm all for a half-hour comedy that just is pure entertainment, but it's also a great opportunity to get to say something. And I'm obviously very into female-led stories, and I still don't think there's enough authenticity when it comes to, women of all ages, whether they're teenage girls or middle-aged women.
The sad fact in the UK is that it's only 11% of the comedy on TV is written by women at the moment, because there is a group of women who are now calling themselves the 11% Club, who did a theatre show to try and get some traction. Watching your show and feeling very seen just as a mum, and also moving through different stages of life, trying to juggle work and home life, is brilliant that you're getting these stories out there.
Yeah, a lot of people have said, everyone's still tough on women, men are tough on women, but women are really tough on women. And I find that really interesting. And I found that's what fascinated me about Mia, was someone who, at her peak, that company employed 200 female writers. And I was like, what an incredible achievement. And yet she's polarizing, because she speaks her mind sometimes. And sometimes she has a gaffe or she has a slip of the tongue, and it's just imperfect, but she's judged so harshly. And I think there's a real lack of compassion in society today. So I was kind of really interested in that. But a lot of people have spoken to me quietly about the show and said stuff like, oh, she's so hopeless. Why can't she just get things right? Why is she the scene with the oranges? Why didn't she bring and peel them? I was like, you just don't get it. You don't get it. We're trying to say something here about, women, we're not always perfect. It was like, I never had baby wipes on me, just as with baby, just things like that seem to some, to the perfect female, it's, oh, how could you do something like that? You just do it because you've got so much going on, and it's just,
I loved Ev's line when she says, I just don't know how to do it. And she's asked, what? Like, be a woman. Like, it was so beautifully communicated that, there's all these sort of expectations that you're trying to live up to that are put on yourself, but also by other women, by, all sections of society. It came across beautifully.
We do have a tough ride.
We do, yeah.
How did you choose who writes what episode?
That's a good question. I think it just came out of a sense in the room of what stories people were drawn to. I did think about it. It wasn't just random, but it was, like Lexi, for example, would have a certain connection to a certain storyline. And I just knew that she was passionate about that. She liked writing about the daughter, so that would be hers. It came sort of organically, but it was really who felt a connection to a certain storyline.
And what was the process then in were you deciding on stories ahead of the time, or did you just work on series 1 to begin with and then start again fresh with series 2? How did that work?
It ended on such a cliffhanger that we kind of knew where we could take it in season 2, but we certainly weren't thinking, I don't even think we knew it was 2 seasons when we were, no, I don't think I did. So no, we started fresh. And that was really fun as well, because it was like, okay, so who did the audience respond to? Who, which characters do they love? Who do we want to see more of? And like, it's such a joy to write season 2 because you know who you're writing to. I mean, I can hear Ash's voice. I've got her so clearly in my head to the point where my daughter, who loves Strife, she's like its biggest fan. She'll be watching, again and again. She'll go, oh, it's just like watching you, Mum. It's like, it's like because I feel like Asher and Evelyn. But yeah, their sweet spots, their comedy, their strengths. So it's really fun to write a season 2. And it's great to see where, like, we love Jeet, we love to give her a nice, juicy storyline for season 2. I just wanted more of her,
Yeah, and that's the thing. Also, season 1 was very much about sort of inventing the world, and season 2 for us, the characters were living in our heads. You could hear how Opal would speak. You would hear how Penny speaks. As a writer, sometimes you'd write something and it would be a very funny line, but you'd think, but Paul shouldn't be saying that. That's more a Penny comeback than a Paul comeback. And so you start hearing that. I remember with season 2, we were very much about where we could go, and there were a lot of ideas that were generated in the room that we kind of had to almost park and say, okay, that's more a season 3 idea, or that's potentially a season 5 idea. And knowing that there is that breadth of storytelling to still mine was interesting. And it helped us sort of focus on, okay, well, thematically, what is the main message of the season, and what's the main thing that Evelyn's going to push up against?
We're really excited about the idea for season 2 that questioning your decisions, and the idea that decisions matter. And so when you make these life choices pretty flippantly, that you're going to be dealing with it for a long time. It's like you don't just suddenly get divorced and that's it. Like there's a connection to this person. Like the marriage and the disintegration of that marriage became really important to us. And it's funny because I went back over my notes, the writer's room notes for season 2, and on day 1, we were talking about, there was a reference to Kramer versus Kramer. It was like, and it was something about Meryl Streep, that she was talking about how she makes these decisions about her character when she reads the scripts, but she never shares them with the director, or she didn't share this with Dustin Hoffman. But she decided that her character hated him, never loved him. And so she makes these sort of character decisions, and then it informs the subtext of her performance. And so we were talking about that on day 1. So I was like, oh, obviously that the marriage and what was going to happen with John and Evelyn was really top of mind and something that we wanted to delve into. And it's very fun. And it's very fun to sort of be boundaryless and think about, oh, that could be season 5, or, you've always got to think big. There's no point in going, well, we might only get one more season. Just go for it.
Yeah.
But the same, you should also not hold on to good ideas. Like you should always try and put them in.
And the show is just full of ideas. I mean, these relationships that you've created are so layered. And I just love the way they go on an emotional journey, like within 30 seconds. That is kind of like a roller coaster, especially with Evelyn and her friends. That female relationship that's always kind of complex. You really managed to nail that. So how did you, in the writer's room, work through the relationships between the different characters, especially that female bonding, the female bitching that happens?
I guess we just talked about what the dynamics of that relationship. So for Evelyn, it was like, okay, so what's her relationship like with John? What's her relationship like with her son, with her daughter, with Lucy, her best friend? So just trying to make sure that they've all got an arc. Whether we're going to see that arc play out, we might not. But for the writers, we needed to know where that story was going and where it was going to end, even if it was happened off screen. And making sure that like Andy was saying before about knowing the character's voice and going, well, that's a line for Paul and not for Penny. Not wanting to double up on those dynamics, making sure that the relationship that Evelyn had with Lucy was different to the relationship she had with Christine, or, like just making sure that there was diversity there, I think is really important for a show because it's just more interesting to watch. But yeah, I guess we just, the writer's room for Strife is a lot of talking. It's a lot of sharing ideas about, the responsibility of and the privilege of getting a TV show. Like, what do we want to say about female friendship? Like, this is an opportunity to say something. Maybe they're hard on each other. Maybe they've got a push-pull relationship. Maybe they're frenemies. Maybe Lucy sees things in Evelyn that Evelyn knows she sees in herself, but she doesn't want to deal with. But, just making sure that there was something we could say in that relationship. And I think that is one of the joys of the show. I think they're Lucy and Evelyn. It's just, they're great. And those actors, I mean, Emma is she's another one who just grounds things. She just, by virtue of her performance and the way that she delivers her lines, it feels real. She doesn't perform. So it's just, it's a lot of it is in casting. I'll say that.
And so in terms of thinking about production as well, we've talked a lot about the blue sky sort of start of the room where anything's possible and you're looking at different storylines. But then did you have all the scripts written before pre-production started, or were you writing and some early episodes were already filming? What was the process?
Most of them are written before. I mean, ideally, yes, every script is written before pre-production. I think I was dragging my feet because I think I season 1, I hadn't written the finale yet. So I still didn't quite understand how it all worked. Like, it's just, the letdown felt like such a unicorn in a way that it was like we were all so young and we didn't really know what we were doing. And this suddenly is like a big production. And I still was sort of finding my way, I think, with season 1. Season 2 was a little more organized. But ideally we're locked in with scripts by the end. But pre-production is really a great time to do a final pass of the scripts for me. Like, it's a great time to often you don't get network notes until pre-production. So Andy is one of those writers that will just continue to, he's not like, I've done my 3 drafts and a polish. Like he will, I know that he will continue. All the writers will. And it's great to give them the opportunity, but it does also get to a point where I think, oh God, they've worked so hard and they've been paid and I don't want them to keep working. And, so it's like, do you want to do another pass or this, or I can do it, or, like it's, but when it just comes to little language tweaks, I'll do that myself. But yeah, I think pre-production, because it's, it's a nice 7-week, 8-week period or something. It is a good time to do your final pass as a showrunner of the scripts.
There was a situation in season 2 where we were leading up to a scene and the actress playing the part wanted to have a discussion with us. And it was very much like, we're shooting this scene on Monday, let's all meet on Saturday and do a little bit of a rewrite on that scene and draw more from the story and give it, again, it was about grounding the scene a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you shoot it and it works, and then its place within the edit doesn't necessarily work. And so you may end up having to do another rewrite and reshoot that. The way that Strife was structured, because we were shooting all 8 episodes kind of concurrently, depending on what location we were in. So sometimes you're jumping from, so you have sometimes that benefit of going, okay, well, we can go back to, if that didn't work on that day, okay, let's try to fine tune it. And then at the end of that block, let's see if we can squeeze in a few more takes on that specific scene.
And Made Up Stories they're such wonderful producers like that. If there's a scene that we're not happy with, or if there's a scene that doesn't work in the edit or something, they will always be open to reshooting or doing whatever we have to do to make sure that everyone's happy. And I remember when I first met with Asha, because I didn't know Asha, and she was like, we're good with Made Up Stories. They'll look after us. They're good, and she'd worked with them before. And they support the creatives to a fault almost, like it's just, it's a really lovely collaborative experience where it's like, no, this is your show. Like, it's not like, okay, you've done your bit, now we're taking over. It's not like that at all. It's like, I'm involved in every aspect of it till the very end, and with a valuable voice, which is just great, lovely.
And the music, I mean, brilliant choices.
Well, we have an excellent composer But then we also have a very healthy music budget, which is like, which really helped. Stuart, the director for season 1, he was funny because he wasn't that set on keeping the music of the time period. Like he was like, well, let's just put whatever music we want, and and we both loved Carolyn Polachek at the time, so I think we had 2 Carolyn Polachek tracks in there. Season 2, we stuck to the time because another director, he was like, no, we need to stick to 2014, and it also worked really beautifully. But yeah, there's some really fun, like Shania Twain in season 2, Feels Like a Woman. It's just like, it just felt so right. It's like, so wrong, but so right. But yeah, the music, I mean, it's a great collaboration, the music, isn't it, Andy? I mean, Andy's is very passionate about music. So, I think we started off with a little bit of a Strife playlist. And, but there were certain, I don't know, everything moves, for example, the song in episode 1 in the pilot where she has the car accident, that was always going to be I'm Like a Bird, Nelly Furtado. But then the director and Ash were like, oh, I don't really like that song. So we changed it. And it's just always shifting. And that's the joy of the collaboration, I think.
You really see that on the screen. You see that collaboration. You see that kind of uniformity of voice and fun. And I mean, it's like we want to see it here.
I think it's just having passionate people involved in all aspects of it. Like I think in the writers' room, like they're all such hard-working writers, and same with both our directors. They just work so hard. I'm constantly blown away by making television when you just see, I mean, everybody down to costume or, like the third AD, everyone works so hard. And you just want to make it a pleasant experience for everyone and have fun. And, we're all away from our families. Andy will come out to Australia and leave his family, and I'm away from my kids. Or, it's just, you just want to make sure that we enjoy it and get the most out of it. You hear about these tyrant showrunners or directors or, where it's just, or producers, where it just sounds miserable. It's like, why would you want to do that?
And I think when everyone is pushing towards the same goal, it's a lot more open. Again, the collaborative process of trying things out within a scene. If there might be a little bit more of a humorous take on something, if this is played up more, or let's lean more into the drama and kind of seeing where it goes. And as Sarah said, Asher and the whole cast are fantastic at being able to thread that line between, if I emphasize this word a little bit more, we steer into drama, but if I give this look while I'm saying it, we move back into comedy. And so there's lots of beautiful moments there. And then with the music, for example, and with the costumes, because we are going back to a time period, it's fun to kind of look back and go, oh my God, I can't believe we wore those and we all love this song. And it helps, I think, transport the audience back. And I know sometimes we'll all be sitting there going, we'll watch an edit and we'll think, oh, I don't think that version of the iPhone was out at that stage or whatever. But the production side of it is so nailed down where mentally you forget how far back it is because everything does feel so current. But it is fun to sort of play with that as well, with the costumes and the look and feel of the show and the music and everything.
I mean, what I found was great going back, because it's not that long ago.
No.
It sort of takes us back to sort of think about how we got here as well. So I think that choice to keep it in the kind of that time, that's 12 years, 13 years from where we are now. But so much has happened. I mean, because technology is moving so quickly. And so to be able to sort of go back and just go, oh my God, did we know then where we would end up now? And I think it just sparks off so many ideas.
Oh, great. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
We absolutely did. And thank you so much for giving us some insights on the whole production process, the writing process, the room. It sounds like a wonderful experience being in the room under Andy, you as the showrunner, Sarah. So I'm sure you've got loyal writers and production members that you'll take onto your future projects. And you've just had another show out. Is it The Family Next Door?
Yeah, The Family Next Door, yes, which I think is coming to ITV, but you'll definitely be able to watch it, as will you, Andy. But yeah, it's been great. It's been really well received, and it's so it's a book adaptation, and it's a suburban mystery. We have an incredible cast. led by Teresa Palmer and Bella Heathcott, Dan Henschel, Catherine McClemens. And yeah, it's just a wonderful, it's just a quiet sort of set in a cul-de-sac in Melbourne, Victoria, well, just outside of Melbourne. It's a gentle mystery, but it's got a nice sort of twist towards the end. But yeah, it's been a real surprise to have such this, like a hit. It's like, oh, wow.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all based on your previous work. Well, thank you so much, both Andy and Sarah, for taking the time to talk to
Oh, it was
us
great.
today.
It was really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Oh, we've loved hearing
Yeah.
about it, and we can't tell you enough how much we genuinely loved the show.
Oh, great.
And
Thank you.
we very much hope that we can make some noise here in the UK. And
Please do.
yeah. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Sarah.
Thank
You,
you.
Andy, you're into your afternoon
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, good luck.
It feels,
Good night, guys. Good luck. Good night.
Thank you.
Go to bed.
We'll be
Sleep
off
well.
to bed.
Yeah, okay. Nice to see you.
Thank
Andy.
you so much.
Good to see you, Sarah.
See ya.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. What an amazing conversation. I thought there were so many brilliant takeouts. But Athena, what was your takeaway from this episode?
Gosh, so many. Wasn't it great? Gosh, if I need to pinpoint what my greatest takeaway is, I think it's when Sarah and Andy were talking about the importance of tone and how the treatment of tone, how basically tone became the lens through which they treated the material. So you might have a really good idea, but it was the treatment of that with the tone, and how Sarah was so, aware of everything coming in on, on tone, if you like, for the series. I think that was one of my big takeaways. What about you, Jack?
I think my biggest takeaway was Sarah's use of the word dramedy, and how she said that, you can always make a script funnier, but if you don't have the building blocks of drama there, then you're never going to get those, no matter how many times you rewrite or work on the script. And I think actually the drama is what makes you fall in love with the characters more. And I think, she and Andy made that, clear in that the drama and the struggles of the characters is what makes them endearing to the audience, and what makes the comedy funnier because of it. And vice versa, that the comedy makes the more dramatic moments more impactful and more emotional, because you're so invested in their struggles and their successes that, every beat, no matter dramatic or comedic, works as a whole package.
Jack, thanks for that, because that's so important to remember her, embracing dramedy. Hannah, what was your big takeaway from this?
My takeaway, I think, is that Sarah had this great little phrase of let ideas breathe. And I think that is clearly important in a writer's room to generate ideas and ensure everyone feels safe enough to speak. But also, I think that's a takeaway that we can all bring into our own work, and also when we're giving feedback to other people, that rather than shut ideas down, be a yes and person and try and ask questions about where the person wants to head with it. Let ideas breathe, and it might not be your first idea might not be quite right, but actually it might be something that you can build on that really is an important step in your development process.
I love that. I think if our podcast had a title, it would be Let Ideas Breathe, in terms of this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really wonderful to hear how Sarah runs her room as an open space, and let ideas breathe. And if you do that, who knows where they can go.
Thank you once again to our guests, Sarah Scheller and Andy Healy.
No Bad Notes is created and hosted by Athena Mandis and Hannah Palmer Pryor.
The show is produced and edited by Jack Richards.
The album artwork is by Andy Healy.
And the music created by Jack Richards using Launchpad by Novation.